You ever have a moment that just stops your heart? Like the ground beneath you suddenly disappears and you're just falling. That's what this was. I wasn't ready for it. I wasn't looking for it. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. There it was, right in front of me. A truth so ugly, so impossible, that for a second, I convinced myself I was dreaming. That this wasn't real. That if I blinked hard enough, if I took a deep enough breath, the words on the screen would disappear. But they didn't. And neither did the knife sinking deep into my chest. They say betrayal comes from those closest to you. But what they don't tell you, what nobody prepares you for, is the way it feels when the people you love most rip your heart out and don't even look back. Because you expect it from enemies, from strangers, from people who have a reason to hurt you. But from your own blood? From the person you'd die for? From your best friend? From your stepson? I wish I could tell you I reacted right away. That I screamed, that I threw the phone, that I stormed into his room and demanded answers. But I didn't. I just sat there, frozen, my mind racing, my body numb. Because how do you even begin to process something like this? How do you take the people you love, the people you trust, and suddenly see them as strangers? And the worst part? The part that still haunts me? I should have seen it coming. I should have known. There were signs. Little things. Moments that didn't make sense. Looks that lingered too long. But I ignored them. I trusted them. And because of that trust, I let myself be blind. But now I saw everything. And once you see the truth, you can never go back. If you've ever felt that kind of betrayal, if you've ever had your world shattered in a single moment, then stay with me. Because this story, it only gets worse. Subscribe now. Because the truth, the real truth, is something you'll never forget. You ever look back at a moment and realize it was the beginning of the end? At the time, it felt so small, so meaningless. But now, I see it for what it really was, the first crack in everything I thought was solid. It started subtly. So subtly that I almost missed it. Let me take you back. I live in a house that used to feel like home. Used to. It's not a mansion, not a tiny apartment either, just a regular 2-story house in a quiet neighborhood. The kind where you wave at neighbors but never really know them. The kind where the silence in your own home can sometimes be the loudest thing of all. For 6 years, I've been married to David. 6 years. That's enough time for the excitement to fade, for habits to form, for routines to take over. It's enough time for love to turn into something else. I wouldn't call David a bad husband. He pays the bills. He doesn't cheat, at least, I don't think he does. But he's absent. Always working late. Always tired. His phone is glued to his hand, but when I text him, no reply for hours. We barely talk anymore. And when we do, it's about schedules, grocery lists, bills. I tell myself it's normal. That this is what happens in marriage. That love just changes. But if I'm being honest, I was lonely. So lonely. And when you're lonely for long enough, you stop noticing the little things. Like the way someone starts looking at you differently. Or the way you start feeling something you shouldn't. Then there's Jake. David's son from his first marriage. 21. Charismatic. The kind of guy who could talk his way out of anything. I met him when he was 15, awkward, a little withdrawn, still adjusting to his dad's new marriage. Back then, he was just a kid. But kids grow up. And sometimes, they change in ways you never see coming. Jake had this energy about him. He was charming, but not in an obvious way. He didn't need to try hard. It was just there. The smirk. The confidence. The way he could make anyone feel like they were the only person in the room. And lately, he'd been acting different. More distant. Always on his phone. Always sneaking out. I chalked it up to being young. Young guys have secrets, right? But then there was Lena. My best friend. My ride or die. We've been through everything together since we were teenagers. First heartbreaks, bad haircuts, late-night drives, blasting music we swore we'd always love. She was the one person who never judged me. Never made me feel small. And when things with David started feeling empty, she was there. Checking in on me. Coming over more. keeping me company. At first, I thought she was just being a good friend. And maybe she was. But now I wonder if there was more to it. Because looking back, I should have seen the signs. Like the way she laughed a little too much when Jake made a joke. Or the way he started hanging around when she came over. Or the way she said, one night, completely out of the blue, "Your stepson has really grown up, huh?" I laughed it off at the time. But that was the first red flag. The one I ignored. Because here's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't happen all at once. It sneaks up on you. One glance. One touch. One secret at a time. And by the time you see it for what it really is, it's too late. The night everything changed started like any other. It was late. The kind of late where the world feels still, where even the air feels heavier. David was working, as usual. Lena had come over for wine, just the two of us. Like old times. We sat in my living room, a bottle of red between us, talking about everything and nothing. But something was off. She was on her phone. A lot. Checking it. Smiling at the screen. I joked about it. "Who's got you all giddy like a teenager?" She just laughed. Brushed it off. That was the second red flag. Then, around midnight, Jake came home. He walked in, hoodie pulled up, looking like he was trying not to be noticed. But I noticed. And so did Lena. Her whole posture shifted, just for a second. A flicker of something in her eyes. And Jake? He didn't even look at me. He looked at her. Just a glance. But in that moment, something in my gut twisted. The third red flag. I tried to ignore it. I really did. But later that night, when I got up for a glass of water, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Through the kitchen window, outside in the dark, I saw Lena. Sneaking out the back door. Fast. Looking over her shoulder. And behind her, stepping out of the shadows? Jake. They whispered. Too close. Too familiar. And then, he touched her. Just a hand on her arm. A second too long. A touch that spoke volumes. And then she was gone. Jake stood there, staring after her. A small smirk on his face. Like he knew something I didn't. Like they had a secret. And in that moment, my entire world started to tilt. I should have confronted him right then and there. I should have stormed outside, demanded answers, screamed at the top of my lungs. But I didn't. I just stood there, heart pounding. Because deep down, I already knew. I just wasn't ready to face it. And that was my biggest mistake. I stood there in the darkness, my heart pounding so loud I swore they could hear it through the walls. My best friend. My stepson. Together. I felt frozen, like my body refused to move, like my mind refused to process what my eyes had just seen. Lena was sneaking out of my house. And Jake was the one seeing her off. The way he stood there in the shadows, hands in his pockets, watching her disappear into the night, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel normal. It felt intimate. I squinted through the dim kitchen light, barely able to make out their faces, but the body language told me everything. A whisper, a glance, a touch that lingered for just a second too long. And then gone. Lena disappeared down the driveway. Jake stood there for another moment, staring after her. And then, without a word, he turned and walked back inside. Straight past the kitchen. Straight past me. I barely had time to duck back behind the counter. My breath caught in my throat. I felt like an intruder in my own home. My hands gripped the edge of the counter as I listened, his footsteps light, deliberate, heading back upstairs. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't panicked. No. He was calm. Like this wasn't the first time. Like he wasn't worried about being caught. Like he knew I was asleep. Or at least, he thought I was. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the back door like it was some kind of crime scene. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. What the hell just happened? Lena had been here for me, right? She had come over for a girls' night, to drink wine, to gossip about work and life and all the things we always talked about. But the way she was acting tonight, the way she kept checking her phone, smiling at the screen. And then Jake, showing up late, brushing past us like we weren't even there. The way his phone pinged every time Lena looked down at hers. I felt sick. I had been in the same room as them and I didn't even notice. But now? Now, I couldn't unsee it. I should have gone upstairs right then. I should have stormed into Jake's room, demanded an explanation, forced the truth out of him. I should have called Lena, told her to get her ass back here and tell me what the hell she was doing sneaking around with my stepson. But I didn't do any of that. I just stood there, frozen, confused, terrified of what I already knew. And in that moment, I made a choice that would haunt me for weeks. I told myself it was nothing, that I was overthinking, that I was being paranoid, that maybe there was a perfectly innocent explanation. Maybe Lena had just forgotten something and Jake happened to be outside. Maybe they had some weird inside joke I didn't know about. Maybe I was losing my mind. Because if I admitted what this looked like, I had to admit something much worse. That my best friend, the person I trusted the most, was betraying me. That my stepson, the boy I practically raised, was involved. That something had been going on right under my nose. And I missed it. So instead of facing the truth, I turned off the kitchen light. And I went back upstairs. But sleep never came. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of the house. Because for the first time in 6 years, it didn't feel like my home anymore. It felt like a stranger's. The next morning, everything felt wrong. You ever wake up from a bad dream, but the feeling lingers? Like a weight pressing on your chest, like something is just off but you can't put your finger on it? That was me. Except I knew exactly what was wrong. And the worst part? I had to pretend like everything was normal. Jake came down for breakfast like he always did. Hair messy, sleep still in his eyes, scrolling through his phone like he didn't have a care in the world. I watched him from across the kitchen, studying him in a way I never had before. Did he know I saw them last night? I waited for him to slip. A nervous glance, a stutter in his words, anything to show he was hiding something. But he was calm. Too calm. And that made me even more uneasy. I wanted to say something. I wanted to look him in the eye and ask, "What the hell were you doing last night?" But I couldn't, because if I asked that, I had to be ready for the answer. And I wasn't. Instead, I turned to my phone. I pulled up Lena's name. My fingers hovered over the screen. What would I even say? "Hey, saw you sneaking out of my house at midnight. Wanna explain?" No. That sounded crazy. Desperate. Like I didn't trust her. And wasn't that the real problem? I wanted to trust her. She was my best friend. We had history. Years of loyalty. She wouldn't do this to me. Would she? I ended up texting something safe. Casual. Me. "Hey, last night was fun. Let's do it again soon." A test. If she was hiding something, she'd act weird, right? Her reply came fast. "Lena, yes. I had such a great time. Let's plan something soon." I stared at the screen. There it was. The emoji. The same one that popped up on Jake's messages the night before. I felt my stomach drop. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But deep down, I knew. She was lying. And just like that, I couldn't ignore the truth anymore. Something was happening. And I was going to find out what. No matter what it took. I tried to push it out of my mind. Tried to tell myself it was nothing. That maybe I was reading too much into things. That the late-night whispers, the stolen glances, the way Lena's hand lingered just a second too long when she touched Jake's arm, it was all in my head. But the problem with suspicion? Once it takes root, it doesn't let go. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. That maybe I was projecting my own loneliness onto something innocent. But the more I watched, the more I noticed. Little things. Tiny details I never would have picked up on before. Like the way Lena laughed at Jake's jokes, just a little too much. Not the casual, easy laughter of a friend. No, it was different. Softer, warmer. Like he was the only person in the room. Or the way Jake always seemed to know when Lena was coming over. He used to be indifferent, barely looking up from his phone when I had company. But now? Now he'd suddenly find a reason to hang around. Even if he wasn't talking to us, he'd be there, leaning against the counter, pretending to scroll through his phone, listening. watching. Then there were the excuses. Jake had never been the type to leave the house much. He was a homebody content with video games, late-night TV, and scrolling through his phone. But lately, he was always leaving, going on drives, hanging out with friends, but when I asked who, he'd be vague. Too vague. Just a couple of people. You wouldn't know them. And when I pressed, he'd get defensive. That was the biggest change. Before, Jake had always been easygoing. But now he had an edge. A short temper. A certain attitude whenever I asked too many questions. Like I was stepping too close to something he didn't want me to see. I started keeping track. Not obsessively, at least, not at first. But I found myself watching them. Noticing patterns. The way Jake's phone would ping and Lena would glance down at hers at the exact same time. The way they'd sometimes slip into another room together, just for a second, just long enough for me to notice. Or how, when they thought I wasn't looking, their eyes would meet. Just a flicker. A moment. But there was something there. Something I wasn't supposed to see. I started feeling like a stranger in my own life. Like I was standing on the outside of something I didn't understand. I told myself over and over again, maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm imagining things. But every time I tried to believe it, my gut screamed at me, no. You know what you saw. You know what you feel. And you know you're right. But the real question was, did I want to be? I wasn't just questioning them. I was questioning myself. What kind of person even thinks this way? What kind of woman starts suspecting her best friend, the one person who's been there through everything? And my stepson? David's son. The boy I had helped raise. The boy I had once scolded for staying up too late on school nights. The one I had worried over when he got his first heartbreak. The idea of it made me feel sick. What if I was wrong? What if I was letting my own loneliness and doubts twist something innocent into something ugly? If I said something, if I accused them, and I was wrong? I could ruin everything. Lose my best friend. Lose Jake. Lose the last people in my life who made me feel less alone. And yet, if I stayed quiet, if I ignored it, and I was right, then what? Then I'd be the fool. The woman who let betrayal fester right in front of her eyes. The night I stopped doubting? It happened when I wasn't even looking for proof. I was in the living room, curled up on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone. David was, as usual, not home. Lena had texted earlier, saying she couldn't come over tonight. Which was fine. I needed space. I needed to clear my head. But then, just as I was about to put my phone down, something caught my eye. A notification. An Instagram story. Lena had posted it just a few minutes ago. I clicked on it without thinking, expecting to see one of her usual selfies or some random quote about living your best life. But when the picture popped up on my screen, my stomach dropped. It was a dimly lit bar. A booth in the back. 2 drinks on the table. And across from her? Jake. His head was slightly turned, as if he wasn't aware the picture was being taken. But I recognized him instantly. His hoodie. The way he held his glass. The shape of his hands. Lena hadn't tagged him. No caption. No explanation. Just a blurry shot of a moment she shouldn't have captured. But I saw it. And suddenly, everything clicked. The late nights. The secret glances. The whispers. The excuses. The way my home had started to feel like it wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't crazy. I was right. I stared at my phone, my entire body frozen. The screen dimmed. Went black. And still, I sat there, gripping it so tightly my knuckles turned white. What now? I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't keep lying to myself. This wasn't nothing. It was something. And now that I had seen it with my own eyes, there was no going back. That was the moment the fear turned into something else. Something sharper. Rage. Because if they thought they could keep this from me, if they thought I was too blind, too weak, too naive to notice, they were wrong. And I was about to prove it. The morning after seeing Lena's Instagram story, I woke up with a new kind of clarity. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was real. But knowing something and proving it were 2 different things. I needed proof. Concrete, undeniable proof. So, I started watching them. Closely. It started with small things. A test. Over breakfast, I turned to Jake, keeping my voice light, casual. Hey, I was thinking about inviting Lena over this weekend. It's been a while since we did something together. Just us girls. I waited. Watched. Jake barely hesitated, but it was there. A flicker of something in his expression. His grip tightened around his coffee mug. The pause was too long. Then, just as quickly, he shrugged. Cool. Whatever. No reaction. No real interest. But his eyes gave him away. Then, there was Lena. I texted her later that day. Miss you. Let's grab drinks soon. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Finally, her reply came. Ugh, I'd love to, but work has been crazy. Maybe next week? Red heart, the same damn emoji. The same excuse she'd given the last time I asked. Lena never turned down drinks. Never. And suddenly, it was becoming a pattern. That night, I lay awake, mind racing. Something was off, but I needed more. And then, fate handed me exactly what I needed. It happened by accident. A few nights later, Jake had gone out again, one of his mysterious late-night drives. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, when I remembered I needed to order something for the house. Jake had left his laptop open on the coffee table. I hesitated. I wasn't the type to snoop. But tonight? Tonight I was. I opened the browser, clicked on the shopping site. But as I was typing, a notification popped up. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't trying to find it. But there it was, right in front of me. A message. From Lena. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. My breath caught in my throat. My fingers felt numb. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. For a split second, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe she meant last night's wine night. Maybe she sent it to the wrong person. Maybe no. No. I clicked. And what I saw destroyed me. The message thread was long. Too long. Weeks. Months. Flirty texts. Inside jokes. Plans to meet up, always when I wasn't home. Secret locations. Lena, can't wait to see you tonight. Same place? Jake, of course. Can't get enough of you. And then. Pictures. Not explicit but enough. A picture of Lena's hand on a table, with Jake's in hers. A blurry mirror selfie, Jake in the background, shirtless. A picture of a half-empty wine glass, captioned, "Wish you were here." And then, the one that made my stomach twist into knots, a picture of my house. My living room. While I was upstairs, sleeping. I felt sick. Everything blurred. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the laptop. It was real. They were sneaking around. Meeting in secret. Right under my nose. While I was pouring my heart out to Lena, telling her how alone I felt. She was sneaking around with my stepson. I felt the rage build in my chest, rising up my throat like a scream I couldn't let out. But beneath the rage, there was something worse. Something colder. Betrayal. I closed the laptop. Sat there, staring at the dark screen. The weight of what I had just seen pressing down on me like a boulder. What the hell was I supposed to do now? I could confront them. I could scream, throw things, demand answers. But if they had been lying to my face for this long, would they even tell me the truth? No. I needed more. I needed to catch them in the act. And when I did, they wouldn't see me coming. By the time I had closed Jake's laptop that night, my entire world had shifted. I wasn't the same woman who had been second-guessing herself for weeks. No more doubt. No more hesitation. I knew the truth now. And I was going to make them face it. I waited a full day before making my move. I needed to be calm. Controlled. This wasn't going to be some screaming match where they could gaslight me into thinking I was crazy. No. I wanted to watch them squirm. So, I did what I always did. I texted Lena. Wine night? Just us girls. I need you. And just like that, she took the bait. She had no idea what was coming. That evening, I set the scene like any other night. Dim lights. A candle flickering on the coffee table. A bottle of red wine breathing on the counter. Lena showed up, all smiles, just like she always did. God, I needed this, she sighed, setting her purse down, her phone clutched in her hand. I bet she was waiting for Jake to text her. I forced a smile. Me too. She poured herself a glass of wine, settling into the couch like nothing was wrong. Like she hadn't been sneaking around behind my back for months. I let the conversation flow. Casual. Light. We gossiped. We laughed. But then, slowly, I started steering it. Toward trust. Toward relationships. Toward betrayal. You ever wonder how people can lie to someone they love? I asked, twirling my wine glass. Lena shifted in her seat. What do you mean? Like, how can someone look their best friend in the eye and keep a secret? A big one. I watched her closely. She took a slow sip of wine, eyes darting to the side, avoiding mine. Bingo. The silence stretched between us. Lena cleared her throat. You okay? You seem different tonight. I leaned in, placing my glass down. Voice steady. Cold. Unshakable. How long have you been sleeping with my stepson? It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. Lena froze. Her face drained of color, the wine glass trembling slightly in her grip. Her mouth opened. Closed. Open again. No words. Just pure, naked guilt. I could see the thoughts racing behind her eyes. Lie? Deny? Make an excuse? But she knew. She knew there was no way out. So she stammered. Emily, I don't, and then. Footsteps. A presence behind me. Jake. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I felt him standing there. Watching. Listening. He had heard everything. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, his voice low, cautious. You were never supposed to find out like this. That was it. That was what he said. Not I'm sorry. Not it's not what you think. Not let me explain. You were never supposed to find out like this. Like that was the only thing that mattered. Like the betrayal itself didn't matter. Only the fact that they got caught. That was the moment I snapped. You didn't mean for me to find out? My voice was rising now, heat creeping up my neck. You mean you didn't want me to know you were sneaking around behind my back? That you, my best friend, were messing around with my stepson? Lena winced. Jake sighed. Like he was the one who had to deal with the problem. Like I was the problem. Lena reached for my hand. Emily, please. I didn't mean to hurt you. That sentence. That stupid, empty, meaningless sentence. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. You didn't mean to? My voice cracked. You've been lying to my face for months, Lena. Months. You were the only person I trusted. And you, I swallowed the lump in my throat. And you, Jake. I took care of you. I defended you. And this is what you do. Jake's expression was unreadable. No shame. No regret. Just nothing. That was the part that hurt the most. The fact that he didn't even care. Lena's eyes were red now, welling up with tears. I didn't plan for this, Emily. It just happened. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. No, Lena. A car accident just happens. An affair? That takes effort. Jake finally spoke again. Look, I get that you're upset. I cut him off so fast his mouth snapped shut. Upset? Oh, Jake, upset doesn't even begin to cover it. I am disgusted. I am sick to my stomach. And I want both of you out of my sight. I turned to Lena. Get out of my house. Her eyes widened. Emily, out. She grabbed her purse, scrambling for the door, but before she left, she turned back. I never wanted to hurt you, she whispered. I didn't answer. I just stared. She didn't deserve my words. Then, she was gone. Jake stood there, arms crossed, looking at me like I was the one overreacting. So that's it, he said. I laughed again. You want an apology? You want sympathy? Get out of my house, Jake. Go wherever the hell it is you've been running off to all these nights. But you will not stay here. For the first time that night, something flickered in his eyes. Something almost like panic. But he covered it quickly. He grabbed his keys, shoved them in his pocket, and stormed out without another word. And just like that, they were both gone. The second the door slammed shut, the silence swallowed me whole. I stood there, staring at nothing. I had just thrown out two of the closest people in my life. And yet, I didn't cry. I didn't break down. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Because the worst part of betrayal? It doesn't end when they leave. It lingers. Like a shadow in the back of your mind. And I had a feeling. This wasn't the last time I'd be seeing either of them. The house felt different after they left. Quieter. Emptier. Not the kind of emptiness that comes when someone leaves for a weekend trip. No, this was a hollow, gut-wrenching kind of silence. The kind that wraps around you, suffocates you, makes every creak in the floorboards feel like a reminder of what was lost. Or rather, what was never real to begin with. I sat on the couch for what felt like hours. Not moving. Not thinking. Just staring at the door they had walked out of, half expecting one of them to come back. To knock. To say something. But they didn't. And for the first time since this entire nightmare started, I was alone. The next day, I woke up to the sound of movement upstairs. For a moment, my groggy brain forgot. Forgot what had happened. Forgot that everything had imploded the night before. But then, as I listened, the sound of doors opening and closing, the rustling of bags being packed, it hit me. Jake was leaving. He wasn't even going to say goodbye. I stayed in the kitchen, hands wrapped around my coffee mug, listening to the dull thud of his footsteps as he came downstairs. The last time he would walk through this house as my stepson. The boy I had helped raise. The boy who had shattered me. He walked in, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, keys jingling in his hand. He barely spared me a glance. "I'm staying with my mom for a while." His voice was clipped. Distant. Like I was the one who had betrayed him. I didn't say anything. Didn't ask him why. Didn't argue. Didn't beg. I just stared at him. Because deep down, I knew this wasn't just a while. He was leaving for good. And honestly, good. He hesitated at the door. For a split second, I thought he might say something more. Maybe an apology. Maybe an excuse. But instead, he just exhaled sharply and left. No goodbye. No closure. Just gone. I let out a shaky breath and looked around the kitchen. Everything felt different. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. But lighter didn't mean better. Because now I had no one left to blame but myself for not seeing it sooner. And no one left to hurt me, except for Lena. And I knew she wasn't done yet. I should have known she wouldn't let things end so easily. Lena never did. She was a fixer. A smooth talker. She always knew what to say, how to twist the truth just enough to make it seem like she wasn't the villain. It started with texts. Dozens of them. "Lena, Emily, please talk to me. I never meant for it to happen like this. Lena, I miss you. Please, can we just talk? Lena, I don't want to lose you over this. Over this." As if it was a misunderstanding. As if she had just borrowed my sweater without asking, instead of sneaking around with my stepson. I ignored them all. But then, she showed up. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the kitchen, staring blankly at the groceries I had no motivation to put away, when I heard the knock. Soft. Hesitant. I already knew who it was. And for a second, just a second, I almost didn't open the door. But I wanted to look her in the eye one last time. To see if she even looked guilty. So, I did. And there she was. Lena. Looking different. Eyes red, face pale. She wasn't wearing makeup. She always wore makeup. She was trying to look broken. Trying to look like a woman who had made a mistake. I knew better. "Emily," she breathed out, like my name was a prayer. Like she had the right to say it. I just stared at her. Said nothing. "Please. I can explain." I tilted my head, a bitter smile curling at my lips. "Really? You can explain? Please, Lena, enlighten me. Explain how you ended up sneaking around with my stepson. Explain how you sat across from me, night after night, smiling, pretending you weren't lying to my face." She flinched. Her lips parted, as if she had an excuse lined up, but for once in her life, she had nothing. Because there was no excuse. So instead, she whispered the same pathetic words Jake had said. You weren't supposed to find out like this. I let out a sharp laugh. That's what you're sorry for? Not for doing it. Not for betraying me. But for getting caught? She looked away. That was all I needed to see. I exhaled, shaking my head. I loved you, Lena. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. You were my best friend. I told you everything. And you, I swallowed hard, gripping the door frame. You are the worst kind of person. Her breath hitched. Please. I didn't want to hurt you. I met her gaze, my eyes burning with something stronger than pain. Then why did you? She had no answer. I stepped back. And then, in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "Don't ever come back here again." And I shut the door in her face. Telling David was the last thing on my list. But the truth? I wasn't sure he'd even care. He came home late that night, as usual. Tired. Distracted. Half here, half somewhere else. I watched him for a long moment. Wondering, would it even matter if I told him? Would he get angry? Would he even react? Or would he just shrug, like he had been shrugging off our marriage for years? I opened my mouth. And then I closed it. Because suddenly, I didn't owe him anything. Not my anger. Not my pain. Not my energy. Nothing. So, I did the one thing he had done to me for the past 6 years. I said nothing. And I walked away. That night, long after Lena had walked away for the last time, after Jake had packed his bags and disappeared, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet. No more late-night whispers. No more stolen glances behind my back. No more phone notifications pinging in perfect sync. Just silence. And yet, my mind was anything but quiet. I kept replaying it all. Every moment. Every sign I ignored. The way Lena had been too available, too present. The way Jake's eyes lit up whenever she was around. The way my gut had been screaming at me for weeks, and I still told myself I was paranoid. How did I not see it? I wasn't stupid. I wasn't blind. So, was it my fault? I squeezed my eyes shut, but the thoughts kept coming. Did I let this happen? Did my loneliness, the aching, crushing, desperate loneliness I never admitted out loud, somehow push them together? I had confided in Lena. Told her about how David barely looked at me anymore, how I felt invisible in my own marriage. Had she taken that as an opportunity? Had she sat there, listening to me, while secretly making me the fool? And Jake. Had he done this to hurt me? Or had he just not cared about what it would do to me at all? I turned over, gripping the sheets. I wanted to be angry. Raging, screaming, smashing plates, kind of angry. And I was. I really was. But beneath all of that, there was something worse. Something I didn't want to name. Relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting. Waiting for my husband to notice me. Waiting for my best friend to show up and make me feel less alone. Waiting for the nagging feeling in my gut to go away. I knew the truth now. And knowing the truth, as painful as it was better than drowning in doubt. At least now, I wasn't lying to myself. At least now, I could stop pretending. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of everything settle in my chest. I had lost my stepson. I had lost my best friend. And David? He had been lost to me long before this. I had spent so much time clinging to relationships that weren't real. And now? Now there was nothing left to hold on to. But maybe that wasn't a bad thing. At some point, exhaustion finally pulled me under. When I woke up, the sun was filtering through the curtains. A new day. A different kind of day. No waiting. No doubts. Just me. For the first time in years, I wasn't worrying about anyone else. Not about keeping my marriage together. Not about protecting my friendship. Not about making sure everyone else was happy. Just me. And suddenly, a thought hit me. What if this was the best thing that ever happened to me? Not the betrayal. Not the pain. But the freedom. The clean slate. I sat up slowly, rubbing my eyes. For weeks, I had been asking the wrong questions. Not, why did they do this to me? Not, what did I do to deserve this? But rather, what do I do now? Because for the first time in a long time, the future was mine to decide. No more waiting. No more hoping for people to be better than they were. It was time to start over. And this time, I wouldn't ignore the signs. I never thought I'd be telling this story. I never thought I'd be the woman who lost her best friend and her stepson in the same breath. But here I am. And now I have to ask, what would you have done? If you were in my shoes, if you saw what I saw, if you felt that gut-wrenching betrayal from the people you trusted the most, would you have confronted them sooner? Would you have tried to forgive? Would you have let them walk away without a fight? Or would you have made them pay? Because even now, even after everything, I still wonder, did I handle it the right way? Or did I let them off too easy? I know I'm not alone in this. Betrayal happens every day. By lovers, by friends, by family. So if this has ever happened to you, if you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you thought would never hurt you, tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to know you're not the only one. And if you want more shocking, real-life stories like this one, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because trust me, you won't believe what's coming next. Betrayal is a funny thing. Not funny in the way that makes you laugh, but funny in the way that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people in your life. Because here's the truth, it never comes from strangers. Strangers can lie to you. Strangers can deceive you. But they can't betray you. Betrayal? That always comes from the people closest to you. The ones you let in. The ones you trust. The ones you would have sworn would never hurt you. And that's what makes it so devastating. Not just the act itself, but the realization that you were never safe with them to begin with. I spent weeks blaming myself, wondering if I should have seen the signs sooner, wondering if I had ignored the truth because I wanted so badly to believe in them. But here's what I've learned. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The first time, not the second, not the third, not after months of ignored red flags and gut feelings screaming at you. The first time, because the people who love you, they don't put you in positions where you have to question them. They don't sneak around. They don't make you feel paranoid. They don't lie to your face while looking you in the eye. They protect you. And if they don't, then they were never really yours to begin with. So if you take anything from this story, let it be this: listen to your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And if someone betrays you once, don't give them the chance to do it again. Because trust? Once it's broken, it's never the same. Not everyone deserves a second chance.